Give it 1 second. I can do the intro commercial, and
Sure.
then we're live now, but they're going to see this, and then we'll go. Hi. Hi.
Hi.
So we met a few days ago. You reached out to the Calexit movement, and we had a fantastic conversation. You were really informed, very aware of what's going on, and you had a clear concept of where you thought things should go. So I was really impressed. I always like talking to people who aren't me and kind of are seeing the same things. I think it's called proof of concept. So
Yes.
Um, so who are you, and how did we meet, and why did you reach out recently?
So my name is Kate Page. I grew up in South Jersey, right outside of Philadelphia, actually. So if anybody is from the area, they know that they really jam revolutionary history down your throat growing up there. And so I became a little bit of a history buff. By trade, I'm a scientist. So by trade, I do IVF for a living. I'm a senior embryologist. Currently, getting my PhD, actually, but have 2 degrees in physiology and neurobiology, and not really ever considered myself a super political person. I grew up in a very conservative home. We grew up in the Pine Barrens, New Jersey, right outside. I don't know if you know that area, but
I've
but
heard of it.
they call us the Pineys because it's just we're simple folk out there, and so very conservative. People hunt for dinner. My dad was a hunter. All his brothers, uncles were hunters, and just grew up in that environment. So when I turned 18, I registered as a Republican. Didn't really think too much about it. In my home, Ronald Reagan was a god. We all know now that he's not, but that's how I was raised. And so I always kept my ear close to politics, but was never super involved, never outspoken about it. And found myself becoming more of a centrist the older that I got. And this election, even in Donald Trump's first election in 2016, I was like, wow, this is really bad. And with what was going on with, immigration during his first term, I thought to myself, this can't be happening in this country. And so I started speaking up about it and becoming more aware about it. But I wasn't super embarrassing for myself right now. I wasn't super engaged in it. Just, speaking up in circles of friends. And then, the second term came about, and I knew it was going to be bad because I had been following the election since, February of 2024. My brother, who I'm not super close with, he's an ex-Marine, and he follows this stuff really closely. And he was sending out warning flags like this guy can't get into office. This is going to be a modern day Hitler. You guys need to pay attention, like in our, family group texts and stuff. And when he got elected into presidency, I sobbed. I cried my eyes out because I knew how bad this was going to be. Plus, I knew that we were heading towards a world where women and minorities were going to be completely erased. We had already seen the platform that he ran on. He ran on a platform of misogyny and racism and hate. And it became a giant alarm bell. And of course, now, fast forward, we're now in early July, and we're seeing everything that we feared that we were going to see. Early people like me people called us alarmists, my friends and family included. They said, you're crazy. He's not going to be Hitler. This is America. This doesn't happen here. And I was like, it's happening. Like, you guys aren't paying attention. It's happening. And so, on Friday, when the budget bill got passed, or I'm sorry, Thursday, when the budget bill got passed, it was like a gut punch because I knew I had been following it, and I knew how dangerous this bill was going to be. And, we have seen other budget bills get passed in our early, American history that have benefited the wealthy, and it has done nothing but bring about depression. I mean, the Great Depression, a big part of that was due to a bill that was passed around that time, where the Secretary of the Treasury was like a millionaire, which back then would have been like a modern day billionaire. And, he passed this bill that transferred the money from the poorest people in this nation who, were fighting for labor rights to the wealthiest individuals in this nation. And it caused a massive crash in the economy, and lots of people died. And we're seeing it now. It's already happening now. So I went online and I said, give me something. What is going on in California that we can do to stop this? And your website came up, and I instantly started reading it. And I heard about the secession movement before, like in the news, but I wasn't really paying attention to it. And I had, in this Trump, I had it to actually just found out, I think I'm banned again on TikTok. I had a TikTok with like a moderate following. It was banned, and then I came back and I got a bigger following and it was banned again. But I made a video a while ago about Gavin Newsom, in his tweet saying, listen, you want to come after us, we'll just withhold your federal funding. And I know that's not legal, but there has to be a legal way where we can stop watering the roots of what's happening right now. And because California is such a massive donor state with our own economy, California seceding from the union is a surefire way of choking out the roots of what this corrupt government is doing. And that aside, even after Donald Trump, hopefully fascism doesn't take over and we're not trapped in this, this holy hell that we're living in now. But that aside, California in and of itself has the ability to be a booming economy. We're the fourth largest economy in the world. We recognize the value of migrant labor. We recognize the value of DEI. We recognize, the value of protecting our natural lands. It's a big state for tourism. We recognize the value of being welcoming. And, why are we as a state allowing ourselves to be completely dragged down by a government which we just found out was incredibly fragile? The Constitution, if you told me how fragile it was 4 years ago, I wouldn't have believed you. And seeing it crumbling now, it's just reminding us how fragile everything that protects us in this nation is. Whereas California, who has, always been a freedom-loving state, I think can offer itself much more to its own community as well as to the world more if they're not being held down by the United States government. So that is why I really am getting behind what you're doing. I'm a huge fan. And yeah, I'm really excited to talk about it.
That's excellent. Okay, I just want to get this down here too. Wow. That's excellent. Okay, we'll go off We'll go off the first one. So just to completely back you up and then also to ask questions. So in 2016, we had a lot of protesters and a lot of support. But a lot of the members that were coming out in 2016 were street protesters, which is the backbone of every movement and is necessary. At the same time, it was a lot of people who were ready to get out into the streets and protest and then, yell and maybe write some letters and emails. But then, that was it. This time around in 2024, I've seen a lot of the same story that you're telling. I saw you in 2016. That was interesting. And then he came back in 2024. And I realized that it's not a fluke. This guy's not going away. Something's wrong, and something permanent and infrastructural has now been set up. Like, this guy could have been a fluke. You could have maybe said something like that in 2016. But then in 2024, he came back, and you're starting to go, okay, this is a permanent feature of America. We can't just say that nobody likes him and nobody cares. Clearly, there's at least a big chunk of the country that supports him. This is the second election that they've put him in, and the third one that he's ran in. So if you look at it that way, we're going from 2016 to 2024, about a decade of Trumpism in America. And I think what you're saying is that finally it became apparent, like, he's not going away. This ideology isn't going away, and his fan base that supports him isn't going away. As I always told people in 2016, even if Trump left, you'd have Mike Pence. Mike Pence backed every single thing he said. In 2024, if Trump left, you'd have Vance. Vance backed every single thing he said. His base supports all the same ideas. He doesn't exactly think of these ideas. They come from Project 2025, or they're old ideas floating around his hemisphere of people and thinkers. So how would things get better if he's gone? I mean, is it him, or is he a representation of the time, that people like this kind of jingoistic, outlandish person? I remember liberals telling me, well, we didn't know in 2016 how bad it was. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Before he was even president, he was saying it was okay to victimize women, and that he didn't really like immigrants, and Mexicans were all bad people. So we're surprised by his behavior in 2016, and even more outlandish. I keep getting, oh, we saw bad behavior, but I didn't know it'd be that bad. Why didn't you? You keep bringing up like Hitler. Yeah, absolutely. He wrote a book, Mein Kampf, and then he said, I don't like the Jews. Okay. But the interesting thing was that, and I've been telling the story recently, I call it my Crystal Knox speech. So he wrote Mein Kampf, but he didn't do anything right away. So a lot of people thought, oh, he's just running for an election. He's just saying stuff to get out there and get some hype and get some attention. He's not actually going to do it. And a lot of the Jewish people in Germany thought that. And they go, he's not actually going to round us up. Nobody's tried rounding us up since like 1408 or something, right? So these are modern times. This is the 1930s. We have radio and television and airplanes, right? We're modern people. Stuff like that can't happen. You're talking about a medieval times thing. We'll never get rounded up. I know he says it. It's just talk. And then there was a thing called Crystal Knock, which was in one night where every Jewish business had all their windows smashed out in every single city across all of Germany in one night, with the cops standing there and watching and doing nothing. And then the next day, nobody protested. There were no speeches by politicians. There was no investigation, anything. And half of the Jewish population at that time said, well, time to get out. If every single Jewish person can be targeted, and no, we weren't beaten up, but our places were all destroyed in front of the cops, and nobody did anything, and there's no justice, and none of the politicians said anything, it's going to get worse. But then there was the other half of the Jewish population in Germany at that time who said, calm down, relax. Nobody's going to round us up. They haven't tried that in centuries. Come on, modern times. Right? We just invented broadcast TV, right? Hitler was at the Olympics and they broadcast the symbol, and we have radio and all this advanced technology. And these are modern times. This isn't medieval times. We understand medicine. We wouldn't do something crazy like that. And all of the Jewish people who felt that way are dead.
Absolutely. And what's so crazy is that they had history to learn from, right? You're talking about like early 1900s. They had just survived through the World War I. There was a nationalist movement for Germany because Germany arguably had gotten the raw end of the deal with having to pay all these reparations for World War I. And they didn't even start it. They were just the backup dancer. You know what I mean? Austria was like, we're going to war. And Germany was like, okay, I guess we have your back because we said we'd have your back. And, they're the backup crew in the club. And then all of a sudden they're responsible for paying the bill. And, there was this rise to nationalism. But German had seen how quickly other countries could fall to authoritarian governments just by suppressing the press. And so the argument of, well, we have radio, we have TV, this is modern, like they failed to see the signs of history because all they did was make a bill that made it so that, the Third Reich had full control over everything that was broadcast here on out. And I want to remind people, it wasn't just the Third Reich that had control over it. The people they were hiring for the Third Reich had to be of the Aryan race and had to be married to somebody of the Aryan race. Like there could be absolutely no question as to the loyalty to this Nazi movement. And the second they shut down the press, it was game over. Now, the one advantage we have in America is that we are all now what I call citizens of the free press. We all have our phones. We all are able, like they can suppress certain, TikTok is very heavily suppressed. They can suppress certain platforms, but there's too many platforms for them, to suppress or whatever. And so wherever there is truth, people are able to speak it for now, until they create a militarized police state that will come and go after journalists and go after citizens that share their videos of people being kidnapped off the street and things like that. And then what they're hoping is to instate this sense of fear in people, so that even though people are seeing things with their own eyes, they're too afraid to talk about it. And the passing of this budget bill was, I don't even want to say the first step, because there have been multiple steps that have led us here. But the passing of that budget bill is a monumental step of creating that sort of environment that Germany created back in, 1930, 34, 35, when like they really started taking over all broadcast systems. And, again, for everybody sitting there saying this could never happen here, it's happening here. We just saw our Supreme Court literally rule against the Constitution and then justify it without saying and failing to justify it. In other words, they didn't really come out and explain why they chose to rule the way that they ruled. We've already seen through decades of corruption in the government, inside trading, not holding the Supreme Court officials or judges accountable. Alito and Thomas are incredibly corrupt, taking gifts, bribes, plane rides, vacations, all of this stuff. And the American people did nothing about it. And so now we're here. And same thing with the German people. They didn't do enough about it because they said the same thing. It's not going to happen here. What you said is exactly right. 1933, the Gestapo gets established. Everyone's like, they're not, what are they going to be about? That's weird. Then 1935, a bill gets passed. I think it was like the Nuremberg bill, ironically enough, that says, they have full unlimited power to do whatever they want. Between those 2-year period, the German people should have woken up, right? They should have been like, wait a minute, these militarized police can come in and, do whatever they want and round up people and strip citizenship from people. You remember, they started stripping citizenship of the Jews in 1933, but when the Gestapo gained power in 1935, they said, you know what, all Jews aren't citizens anymore. And they're like, I can't believe this. Like, it's been happening for 2 years. Now, for us in America, this is happening faster because we're bigger. It's harder to contain. They have to move at a faster pace in order to squash any sort of dissent, right? But we have the advantage of history and we're not using it. And what I always say is, somebody, again, I'm not a historian, but I love history. And it's like, it's not enough to know history. We have to know how to use it. It's not enough to be able to say, okay, yeah, this happened then and that happened. We have to be able to learn from the lessons of it. And that's where I am so frustrated in this country, because we aren't learning the lessons from history. There's a lot of us out there that are saying like, hey, this needs to happen. But yes, you can't. The Jews should have left Germany, like you said. They should have left Germany. And California should leave the Union. This is the time to leave the Union.
There you go. I'm smiling. I'm blown away by your historical knowledge. I just learned some stuff, and that's hard. I've been a Nazi scholar since I was a teenager, in shock that the knowledge is useful. Right. I studied it and I thought it was just a kind of fascinating topic of how evil people could beat other humans. And I thought, well, that's just interesting for interesting's sake. Right. I never thought that studying that regime would be relevant and a survival tip. Everything you said makes sense. The German people absolutely didn't think that it would get that bad. I'm sure you saw the quote by the famous German Catholic priest. They came for the Jehovah's Witness and nobody said anything, and they came for this group and nobody said anything, and they came for the Jews and nobody said anything, and finally when they came for me, there's nobody left to speak out on my behalf. Absolutely. One of the things that got me was we just interviewed J.J. Ames yesterday. He's been in Washington, D.C. for 40 years, and he had this post: "The road to fascism is lined with people telling you to stop overreacting."
I'm going to take a picture of this so I can follow him on Blue Sky.
Yeah. So is it Katie?
Kate. Yeah. You can call me Katie. My whole family does. But
what do you prefer, Kate?
I usually go by Kate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kate, why can't you calm down and chill out? Trump's just using words. He's just talking. It's just talk. Why don't you just, calm down? It's just talk. Just like when Hitler was he was just talking. Just, wrote a book to get people riled up. Wasn't going to do anything about it. I mean, yeah, this is the same thing. So and he saw this and I'm like, that's it right there. Because I've been telling that Crystal Knox story. And the way that I would tell it is I would tell it to African Americans and the Latinos, and I would have two slightly different changes. And I go, now you heard about Crystal Knox. Let's fast forward. There's a guy called Donald Trump. It's the Republican National Convention. They're going to announce that he is the party's guy. He's running for president. This is a huge moment in politics where a national party says, this is our one candidate, and we're all going to back this person to run for the presidency. Everybody's on him. It's the second reelection, all eyes. He has a press box where he can have one guest sit right next to him in his press box. There's maybe 100, 120 million Republicans in America, or so about fans, maybe 50 to 100,000 Republican elected officials, media officials. He picks Jason Aldean, the country music star of the song Try That in a Small Town, which is, video of people fighting and minorities fighting white people, and then also was filmed in front of the last courthouse in the South to order the execution of an African-American male. And the courthouse isn't featured in 3/4 of the music video. And he goes, oh, whoops, I didn't know that, nobody bothered to do a Google search, which takes 12 seconds to find out what this courthouse is about. Not me, not the director, not the producer, none of the staff, nobody who worked on this thing, which clearly cost over $1 million. It was a high production music video. I mean, visually it looked great. It's just horrible and disgusting what they were showing. So I'm like, I don't buy that you have this high production cast and nobody knew what Google was and could do a 12-second search. That's how long. You just type in the courthouse and it comes infamous site of that right up front. Right. To back it up, Jason Aldean decided to dress up like a rapper the year before and wear blackface, but he apologized for that. And I will tell an African-American audience, I go, that's just an accident. Yeah. He just accidentally says, of everyone in America and all the Republican elected officials and all of the Republican supporters, I pick this guy. Don't read into it.
It's a soft launch, right? Like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, oh, my bad. I didn't mean to do that. Like, like the slight backpedaling, like, I'm going to go ahead and do something. And then, oh, if it causes outrage, this is them testing their boundaries. This is them trying to figure out how far they can go. And as we've seen in this country, you're able to go further and further now. Like back, 10 years ago, well, wait, was he president 10 years ago? Math. But a couple of years ago, if you had done that, right, you would have been what we call canceled. And now it's like, oh, we just want to see how far we can get with this. Like, it's testing boundaries with the American people. And the line keeps getting pushed back. Like, oh, well, it's not that bad. Or, oh, they didn't know. And, all of these people, these celebrities that have these weddings on these big plantations, like, all you have to do is Google it to know where you're choosing to have your video or your wedding. It's sending a clear message. It is a soft launch for you to see, are we there yet at the point where we can just start, openly, lynching people again. And I had to remind you too, you mentioned something earlier that reminded me of something when you were talking about the night of broken glass. and how like a lot of Germans were like, oh, it's not that, it's not that bad. Throughout our own history in the United States, we have painted groups of people in a horrific way to dehumanize them, which is exactly what Hitler did in Mein Kampf. And, if we remember, like with the Jews, how we painted them out, when they were circulating flyers of them with sharp, razor sharp teeth and actual horns. And they're like, these are what Jews are. These are what Jews are, to make people like look at a Jew and be like, oh my God, that's a scary demonic person. And over time, that starts to become normalized. And again, that line gets moved as to what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. During, during the enslaved trade, in this country, we did the same thing with escaped enslaved people. They're criminals, they're violent, they're going to kill you, they're going to do all these things. These people were incredibly oppressed, trying to escape their oppressors. And the way that they got people to basically, for lack of a better word, because it sounds minimalized, but to tattletale on what they had seen, like, oh, I saw somebody running through my yard or whatever, was by painting them out to be criminals. And we are now seeing that in modern day America, where they are painting these, migrants in our country as criminals. But if you look at sanctuary cities, the crime rate is actually lower for most sanctuary cities. I live in San Diego. Our crime rate is incredibly low here. Violent crime rate, incredibly low here. If you look at all of the data, it will show that immigrants are much less likely to commit crimes, because they don't want the heat. They don't want to be caught. They don't want, you know what I mean? Because they have so much to lose. And so it's infuriating to me that we're falling for the same tricks that we have fallen for in this country over and over again. In the, it goes to everything. Polish people are stupid, right? That was something that they told everybody, because the Polish language is so difficult for people to understand. Instead of being like, wow, this language is super complicated, they're like, oh, well, they're just stupid. Excuse me, because they couldn't pick up on English as quickly because their language is so complicated. Asians, people don't realize Asian Americans, we weren't even allowed on film. We were considered too ugly. We were considered, too bizarre. Like, we weren't even allowed in film. We got our voting rights. We were the last to get voting rights in this country, and Asian communities, because just cultural reasons, they didn't, they didn't fight as hard as they probably should have. And thank God for the civil rights movement, because that gave us a lot of rights. And then if you even look back at, like, in the 1500s, what did they call Native Americans? They called them savages.
Right.
We're seeing the same thing today. They're calling people of Mexican, South American, Latin American descent savages, criminals, Haitians, eating your dogs. The White House just posted some bullshit post about, these cats, like, stop them from eating us. Like, you've got to be kidding me right now. How in America are we falling for this? Historically, we have known that any group that paints any other group in this light has historically always been the bad guy. And yet here we are in America, falling for a hook, line, and sinker again, because the hook is wrapped in an American flag. But nothing of what's being done right now is patriotism. In fact, if we just celebrated the 4th of July, if you read the Declaration of Independence, they give a list of grievances. Like, hey, this is why we want to get out of here. They give a list of grievances. We're already 60% there. And the other ones are coming. The groundwork is already laid for the other ones to come, with the exception of, the indigenous people part in there, which obviously was very racist, because you have to remember, Declaration of Independence was only independence for white men, essentially. Well, they certainly weren't looking to, allow the enslaved people to be free. They certainly weren't looking for women's suffrage. Even in women's suffrage, the only ones that got it first are the rich ones. I mean, our history is obviously tainted, but we should be learning from it, not repeating it.
Yeah.
And when you look at the Declaration of Independence, and the 13 colonies said, these are all the reasons why we need to leave. One of them was tariffs. terrorists without our consent. I was like, why are we still here? Why are we still here? The Jews should have left Germany after the Night of Broken Glass, and California should leave the Union after we are seeing how fragile democracy is in this nation. And I certainly hope if California leaves the Union, I certainly hope that other freedom-loving states like New York, for example, will consider doing the same, because California has to lead the way. We're in the best position to lead the way over anybody else. But the country, you're right, these ideals are not going anywhere. They're, unfortunately, we try to teach these people, we try to educate, we try to, teach love and kindness and sharing, all the things that you teach in preschool and kindergarten is completely undone by what they're taught at home. And the ideals are not going to leave. And so what do you do as a state as powerful as California? You sit there and say, well, I guess we'll keep funding it. Or you say, you know what? We're going to fund a free nation where all people are welcome, where we care about our migrants, where we do go after criminals, both migrant and citizen criminals. And, that's the kind of country I want to live in. That's the kind of country I believe in. We follow the Constitution. We follow the Declaration of Independence. We maintain checks and balances to protect the people of this land, not the wealthy, but the people, the hardworking people in this land that contribute to the economy. So again, it brings us back to why I think your movement is just so important right now, especially in this period of history that we're seeing. But I think for the love of democracy in what we're now calling the perimeter of the United States of America, in that perimeter, to have a state that declares itself, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all people in this land are entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And once the government stops serving the people for those three things, it is time to revolt. That's what our forefathers told us. Why are we not listening?
Let me show you a couple pictures. So here's Jason Aldean. And
yes,
there's
the reason why I stopped listening to country music.
Yeah.
I gave it up after this. Yeah.
I grew up around it. I knew it was racist before, but yeah. This was pretty much over the top. And then they popularized it and nobody said anything about it. I'm like, yeah, okay. So that's the whole country music industry is basically shielding this guy. There he is. And then a grim history, the courthouse, and Jason Aldean's new music video features sight of a black teen's lynching. And here's Jason Aldean wearing blackface the year before, but somehow this was just an accident that he did this. Nothing to see here. You're overreacting, because he said he's sorry and accidentally nobody looked at Google, and he didn't know blackface was wrong the year before when he did this, and he just did it. But he apologized, right? So that makes it okay, and we can relax. Here's a little pictures of Crystal Knocked. There it is, all the people smashing out the windows. And this is my favorite one. Here's cops helping. And then there's the police and the Nazis standing by, and they're all helping smash out the windows. So that happened. You can fast forward to this. And then here's my favorite one is, so J.D. Vance, they call him the moderate to Trump, I guess, but he got into power by running a TV commercial asking people if you hate Mexicans. So it was after he won his Ohio race, using specifically this commercial, that Trump first reached out to him. So people are like, when did he go from being a never Trumper to backing Trump? He was going to lose his Ohio race. He wasn't getting enough Republican votes. Then he came out with this commercial, got more Republican votes, and then Trump reached out to him. And that's how he became vice president. So for Latin people, we're seeing this and they're going, oh, what do you think of that? And then here we go. Stephen Miller is now in charge of immigration. He was listed as a white supremacist by the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. And for that designation, he was rewarded with power. So now we're back to here. As a minority, brown-skinned person, non-white person, how does that make you feel seeing what I call dog whistles, and I think you're calling soft launches? Do you get that Crystal Nocti feeling here? Looking at
I
this?
do. I absolutely do. And I want to remind you, I'm obviously a double minority. I'm a female minority
Yes,
in
ma'am.
this
Yes, ma'am.
country.
Of course.
And
Yes, ma'am.
I work in IVF, so my expertise is in human reproduction. And when I see the attacks on women, the argument about abortion, which by the way has its stems in containing the Black community. People don't realize the abortion argument was based on racism. It wasn't based on whoever created the slogan pro-life, they should get an award next to a De Beers, where a diamond is a girl's best friend, because those slogans have power. And when you're like, oh, they're just words, words have a tremendous power. And saying that, pro-life and abortion is murder, that's obviously just a way to control women. So I see red flags absolutely everywhere. And I'm very concerned. I am past reproductive age. I, am employed. I, am educated. I'm older. I'm almost 50. So I have I'm not going to be as affected, but I think about people's daughters. I think about their, their nieces, their friends' daughters, all of the things that I think about them dying because they couldn't get life-saving care that they needed. And so, yes, I see this attack. It's a multi-pronged fork. Unfortunately, it's attack on races, it's attack on gender equality, it's attack on the economy. I have a small nonprofit that I founded in 2018. It's a nonprofit that helps marginalized girls in a rather second largest slum in Kenya. Actually, it's called the Ubunga slum. And we set up a learning center there. And when I went there, I started researching, how did they get here? How did Kenya get here? Kenya has, huge exports. It's a completely enriched land. It's one of the only countries in Africa that has all big five. So it's huge for, safari tourism. It has tons of national parks, national lands. How did we get here? How are these people making $1.50 a day and dying at the age of 40? And I started doing some research, and the things that nations have in common that lead to extreme poverty and extreme, uneven distribution of wealth, where the super wealthy in Kenya are super wealthy and the super poor are slum poor. Two things: misogyny, because there's no equal access to education, not educating girls, and a government that sells out its people for its own personal gain. We're there. We're there. And so, yes, everything that's happening with the migrants in this nation, absolutely, they're coming for women next. And it's just a matter of time. People say, how did Afghanistan get the way they did? How did Iran get the way they did? Iran is a whole TED talk on how they got the way they did. But, how did they get this way? Iran got that way through religious nationalism. We are there, people. We are there.
Good point. I see
and also an incredibly corrupt government, right? It's like the leader of Iran was incredibly corrupt. The Shah that was all for modernization. He was very easily bought. So we're here.
Yeah. America overthrew a democratic government in Iran and installed a brutal dictatorship. And then they sent the CIA over in order to teach the Shah how to basically terrorize his population in order to keep control of them. And that's a story that's not typically told. Is they go, oh yeah, there was this, the Shah was out in ally. Yeah, and they overthrew the government and executed anybody in the way, and then put him in, and he killed anybody off that was disagreeing. And American tax dollars went to teaching that government how to literally torture people. And one of the things that they would do that they found was specifically very effective in Arab cultures was to you victimize the woman of the family, and then that's what gets the guy to do what he wants. So we were engaged in victimization of women and mass torture and death on a scale not really seen before. So, but you won't hear that mentioned on TV. You'll just hear Iran bad. And we're not going to get into the debate, but I'll just point out they never talk about how did this get started? Who did
How did
what
we get
to
here?
whom
Yes,
first? Who
correct.
did what to whom first?
Yes, same with Afghanistan. Same with
Yeah,
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. How did we get here with it? So we're talking about scary things the administration's doing. I wanted to make sure to bring this one up.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah, so because I'll bring up the racism and the sexism, and people are like, "Oh yeah," and then I bring this up, and they're like, "Oh, I missed that." I'm like, "There's the Secretary of Defense saying when he's asked, would you shoot down protesters?" and he goes, "I'm not going to answer that." I'm like, "Okay, we're talking about Crystal Knock.
yeah.
What do you think that means when he says that?"
That means they're going to do it, because the difference between 2016 Trump and the difference between 2024 Trump or 2025 Trump is this. In 2016, he had guardrails. He had people in his cabinet that said, we're not going to do that, right? He wanted them to shoot protesters in the knees, and they said, we're not going to do that. This administration will absolutely do it. This was a congressional hearing. He was under oath. I watched it. He wouldn't say it. Under oath, he would not say it. And that should terrify everybody.
I
And
was wondering, yeah.
and the a lot of the local police forces are now making these contracts with ICE. Again, we are heading rapidly into a militarized police state. And I don't think people understand how dire that is in this country. They've already sent, the National Guard here and Marines to California. They just sent some to Florida. We are in a militarized police state and rapidly getting there. And, I know that they can't declare martial law in the whole country because the country is it's too large. But what they can do is they can scare everybody into submission. And this is exactly what they would do. They absolutely would shoot protesters, and they would blame it on Democrats or whatever they would blame it on. I mean, that jerk, for lack of better words, I'm trying not to curse in here, who shot and killed that Democratic representative in Minnesota and her husband, and then shot and severely injured the other two. What was the first thing that they came out? MAGA came out and said it's a Democrat. Like there are no facts. There's no truth. Truth is the new fake, right? And so yes, they'll do it, and then they'll sweep it under the rug and be like, oh no, that didn't happen, or that was a Democrat that did it, or yes, they absolutely are going to do this. It's only a matter of time. And they're going to say, oh, they were violent, and we've already seen the footage in LA. The people weren't violent. The police were violent. The police were the ones that were trying to invoke violence in the people. They're absolutely going to do it.
I did talk to some people who were down there in LA, and they go, what you're seeing on TV and the reality of here is nothing the same. If you watch TV, they present it like all of LA was on fire. If you talk to people from LA, they'd go, it's one block. It's one block in all of Los Angeles. LA is a gigantic mega city, one of the top 10 on the planet. They're talking about one block in downtown. And if you watch TV, it's like LA riot. And I'm like, LA riots means half the city's going up like in 92. That's not what's going on at all. One city block was where all of it was localized to. And then the picture you saw on TV was something completely different. I'm like, that's interesting how they presented that. So,
did you see all the footage? Sorry, did you see the footage of the LAPD shooting reporters, aiming their rubber bullet guns and shooting reporters? One of them got shot in the head. Like they were aiming. You can see the videos are online.
Yes. Oh, well, they said that was it was an accident.
It's not.
That
You
was
can
it.
see them literally aiming to shoot.
Well, this
You know,
brings up
I
yeah, that brings up a great point. If I can, um, uh, 2016, California said we're going to protect our undocumented people, and we are ordering our police agencies to not work with the federal government on capturing ICE people. And then by the time that was done, 2/3 of all California police agencies had gone against what the state had said and were working with ICE officials. And now we transport back to 2024, and I'm seeing all sorts of California politicians, including Newsom and Bonta, go, "We're going to protect the undocumented like we did last time." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Two
you
thirds
didn't
of the
protect
police,
them last time.
yeah, 2/3 of the police agencies said, "I choose the federal government over you, and what are you going to do? Sue me?" There's no court that will allow you to sue me for choosing federal law over state. Won't happen. And as long as you're part of the federal system, this is the way that it is. The only way that you can actually punish those police agencies and force all of them into line is to be fully independent, so that the federal law is the same as the state law. So they can't do that again. And I'm seeing Bonta and Newsom, and I get what they're trying to do. They want people to feel better, but I think they're doing a disservice by letting people. They're saying like, we whooped them really good last time, and we'll do it again. And I'm like, and we won most of our court cases. And I'm like, that's all not true. You barely won over half, and you never talk about. And this is how I know it's a lie. They never talk about the cases that they lost and the people that were hurt last time. It's always, we won. We had so many court cases. We stuck it to them. Okay, tell me about the ones you lost. Were
Yeah.
they significant? Did they mean nothing? Oh, we lost on stripes around fire poles. No, I think you lost on unlimited detention. You lost on people being thrown into these prisons and then disappeared and undocumented, and you don't have to tell people. You lost on investigations on 5 people who died from that in California. You lost on being able to protect your land and water from Trump, because it turns out federal land is under federal control. You lost on being able to protect undocumented people from the cops. You lost on being able to provide healthcare service for undocumented. You lost on being able to force businesses to not comply with the federal government for arresting ICE. You lost on saying you'd shut down the border wall. You lost on saying you punish companies who worked on the border wall. And you lost on Trump being able to redirect funding for the border wall. So that's never brought up. And I want to hear, you lost on the border wall. You lost on immigration. You lost on undocumented. You lost on Muslims. I can only imagine being a Muslim person and being told the country's built on religious freedom. Oh, now anybody who's part of your group we hate and can't come into America. What? That goes
Yeah.
against the entire concept of the US. You totally lost on that. And you lost on stores being able to discriminate against LGBTQ people. You can say, I'm not going to serve you because you're gay, or I won't make a cup for you. Supreme Court backed that. And you lost on racially profiling Latinos. The Supreme Court said you can absolutely stop someone and pull them out of their car if they look like someone like me. And so I'm like, what exactly are you winning on? And how come you never bring up all the things that you were a total, complete failure to protect us? You lost on the abortion thing,
Mhm.
right? I mean, that was pretty big. They're still talking about a nationwide ban. Gun safety, we've lost so many gun safety regulations, and now they're talking about 50 state concealed carry, where you get your gun registration in Kentucky and you can just roll into California.
And the gun laws are so different in California than other states. I mean,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
California
That's the
actually has
whole
one of the
idea, is
strictest
that
gun
we're
laws.
going to have gun-toting people just roll in here,
Yeah.
and there's nothing we can do if the Congress votes for it. And people go, what's the chance of that? Well, what's the chance of this big, beautiful thing that just got passed? Basically every Democrat voted against it, and it still passed the entire federal government, House, Senate, and the president. And if there was ever a court trial or any attempt to push it back, the Supreme Court is owned by Trump. The Supreme Court is now the most conservative it's been since 1923, according to NPR. So it's the most conservative they've ever been. If they can push that through, how do we know they're not going to push a nationwide abortion ban and a nationwide concealed carry?
Right. And at what point is California going to say this doesn't work for our citizens? And again, other states need to do that as well. I don't want to just be like, we're going to save ourselves and like, too bad everyone else in those other states. I don't want to do that. But California has to lead the way. They have to light the lantern in this case, you know, because you're right. Conservative is a nice way of putting it. The Supreme Court in this country is not conservative. We are fascist. Militarized police states is literally, once you get that, you are now in fascism. And we just funded it. We just allowed it to be funded. We're here now. So at what point do we say, you know what, this isn't going to work for our people? This isn't going to work for our economy. You know, I hate that we call it the big, beautiful bill. And when it's the Trump tax, I think that might have been what got me banned on TikTok. It's not it's a Trump tax, and it's going to hit us in a multitude of ways. You know, it's going to the cost of inflation, number one, is going to go through the roof. The cost of tariffs going through the roof. The loss of revenue, you know, depending on what source you look at, they're looking at anywhere between 12 and, you know, $28 billion a year to be lost to tourism. I can't believe that the Olympics is still planning on being here, or the World Cup is still being here. Like, I can't believe that. I don't know. These people need to be like, we need to get out of here. This is dangerous. We can't have people coming here for this, you know. I just, at what point, like, where, you know, we talk about, like, where's the line for MAGA, right? Like, oh, okay, well, if you find out that he's in the Epstein files, then we're done. But they're going to release the Epstein files. Someone's going to release it, and they're not going to care. They're going to call it fake news. He's already used that term fake news, which, by the way, is how authoritarian governments establish themselves. They call the truth fake. Right? That's the first step. Yeah. And there is no line for these extreme MAGAs. There is no line for them. They're going to lose their Medicaid. They don't care. They're going to lose rural hospitals, even urban hospitals. They don't care. You know, they're going to lose everything, and they just don't care. Exactly. And
just, if I can, real quick, just to back you up. You're going to go right back to you, but just to back you up.
No, of course. Yes, please.
The big, beautiful bill, 2 million Californians will lose access to health care, and about 700,000 Californians will lose access to SNAP benefits. All of these people are poor. By the way, we're going into a recession, so things are going to be even worse for them. But to completely back up what you're saying,
he's going to bankrupt your state.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we're going to lose billions on top of being a donor state. But this is people who are going to lose health care coverage under Trump's bill, and versus people who voted for Trump. Yeah. And so what you'll see is that the Central Valley, Kings, Kern, Tulare, Fresno, Madera, San Joaquin, it's like 54%, 45, 64, 54% of the population in these areas is absolutely dependent on this healthcare. And you look at the map to the right and also the black line drawing it in, those are the same people who voted for Trump. So the people who voted for Trump are going to have their health benefits cut when they're the most in need. They're more in need than the more liberal sections of California, and they're going to get hit. So just to back up what you're saying, there you go.
Absolutely. And what's so crazy is that people in today's government continuously insist on voting against their own best interests. Women, minorities, and people on Medicaid. And you know, they're like, oh, we want to get rid of Obamacare. They don't like the name. They just don't like the name. Do you not understand what that is? That's your Medicaid. But, you know, they're very sneaky because with this Trump tax, they're not going to do these cuts until after the 2026 election.
I've heard that. Yeah.
They're knowing it's in the bill because they want to keep these Republicans in power. It's our job to educate the public and let the public know, hey, but, you know, it's hard because you're screaming to a void because they keep telling you that you're being an alarmist. It's like, we're not paying attention. In the very beginning, my boyfriend called me Chicken Little. We almost broke up. I said, don't you dare call me Chicken Little. The sky is falling. You're not looking up. And so now he's completely changed his tune.
Well, there it is. The road to fascism, lined with people telling you to stop overreacting. I hadn't seen this post before.
I love it.
I had been telling Jade, I had been giving the Crystal Knox speech for 3 months. Never seen this post before. Never met JJ before yesterday. He's saying the exact same thing. These things happen because people go, whoa, chill out, relax. Why are you overreacting? And I go, when you're facing the potential for a second Holocaust or the rise of fascism, how's it a bad idea to overreact? The worst possible thing is you prevent it from happening. And the worst possible thing might be like, oh, you overreacted, but we still kept our democracy because somebody was watching them. Okay, so I don't see how this is that bad a reaction. I want to show you this if I can. So, yeah. So here, donor state status. And then here, let me get rid of this other one here. So 2024 election in red, donor state status, and the one up top, they're different colors. And then if you look at the left, it shows everybody in red voted for Trump and is a donor state and lives off basically the liberal states supporting them. So every state in red in the map on the left lives off liberals giving them money because they don't actually put more into the federal system. They live off us. We subsidize them. And they voted for Donald Trump, who doesn't like California, who sent the Marines in on a civil protest, which has never happened in U.S. history, directed the National Guard against the will of the people, the government, and the governor to deal with the protest. That hasn't happened since, I think, 1954. And even then, that was to enforce desegregation. Now it's being used to put down a civil protest.
Oh, correct. Wow. Right. Mm-hmm.
Really different use of that. Plus, you got to go back 70 years to find a time when somebody did that. Then he threatened the governor with arresting the sitting governor. You got to go back to 1864 with Abe Lincoln and the Civil War to see something that happened. And Abe Lincoln used that against governors who threatened to shoot federal installations. Trump's threatening him for not cracking down on a civil project. Just to point out the massive difference between when this was done before. Like they're talking about, I violate federal law or I'm going to shoot federal soldiers. And now we're like, no, I don't. You're going to have a protest and I want you to crack it down. No, we'll do the same thing. So if that wasn't enough, my favorite as a Latin person was to watch one of the first Latino people to ever be made senator in American history, manhandled and then thrown to the ground like he was dog trash after announcing that he was a senator and when only wanting to ask questions at a public forum designed to inform the public and ask questions. That was not enough. There was the Palisades fire earlier where Californians were burned alive and lost their homes and they're destitute and they're beside themselves. And in that atmosphere where they're at their worst off in their life, Donald Trump says, I'm not sure I want to give disaster assistance because I don't really like Californians. So that's when the Calexit movement really got big. It wasn't when the initiative came out. We got a few articles. It was after he said that we exploded in the news because people were like, that's never happened in American history before, where a president goes,
and it's our money. It's our money.
Yeah. Well, we're donor state.
It's our money. Give us back our money. $83 billion. Like, you got to be kidding me. Yes.
Here you go. Just to show you how bad it is. There's California. Which states contribute the most? In the red box is California, way beyond every other state. So those are every state who gives more than they get. Rhode Island's there at like 3 billion, and then we're at 78 billion. I know it's a little hard to see, but basically California gives, if you look at the chart, a lot of those blue and pink dots are on the far left. Here's California on the far extreme right, which should tell you that we give the most by far than any other state by far. The New York and New Jersey are a little bit to our left. And then you have to go damn near to the left corner to see all the other states. So we massively subsidize this place. Here's another chart. That's California, that giant orange bar.
Yeah.
That's us giving way more than anybody else to subsidize this place. And then in return, they elect this guy who does these things to us. And how is that a smart situation?
What person stays in an abusive relationship when they are the ones that are providing everything? What person is going to stay in a relationship where they're constantly being targeted physically and emotionally when they're the ones that are literally funding? You got to be kidding me. Why are we still here? Why are we still? We should not have to take this. I'm tired of California and New York being targeted. You're biting the hand that feeds you. California needs to bite back. And I'm all for this. Listen, I know like secession is complicated, right? And it's, it's going to be a long process, but we can't wait on it anymore. We have to move forward with this movement now. We're running out of time to act, because once they put the police state on us, once they start shooting people in California, either Californians are going to have to fight back by themselves with their own arms, or we're just going to have to lay down and take it. And I don't think either one of those are options for me. I want to do this, the right way. California is not being respected by this government. The democracy is incredibly fragile. Even if we're able to flip the elections in 2026, I don't know what's going to happen with the presidential election. These people are not beyond. They don't follow the law. They're lawless. So how are you going to try to govern a government with laws that's run by lawless people?
Yeah. I'll respond to what you just said, but to also add up after the Palisades. And then he said, I'm going to threaten to cut funding over how you handle transgender people. So I don't like how you handle civil protests. I don't like how you handle the undocumented. I'm not sure I want to give disaster assistance because I'm not sure I like you guys. Then after that, he said, maybe I'll give disaster assistance if you change your immigration stance or your LGBTQ stance. And then he said, I'll threaten you over transgender. So these are all cultural issues. I don't like how you deal with immigrants and transgender and people and protests and stuff. These are all cultural issues. And in response, even though we subsidize the place, this is how we get treated, very hostile. And I think it was this one. Yeah, this is my favorite quote. So the Atlantic magazine is a top level policy magazine in America. So it's read by people in DC, and it's a foreign policy magazine, plus high level gov magazine. And I've been doing Calexit for a decade. For the first time ever, this is the top policy magazine in America with the top government policy thinkers, read by top government people across America. And they said this on Friday. Newsom mused about California withholding federal taxes, plainly illegal. But you can see where he's coming from. In fiscal year 2022, state contributed $83 billion. California is not getting disaster aid, but is getting hostile deployments of federal troops. Californians might find it harder to see what's in it for them.
Bingo. Mm-hmm.
So
absolutely.
That's
and we're paying for the military. All of the states, they pay federal taxes. A big portion of that federal taxes is for the military. So why are we paying for our own oppression?
Exactly. Yeah. My favorite thing was we paid for the Marines, and he goes, I'm going to send the Marines in on you. Those were combat trained Marines. And then he said, they're angry. He advertised that these are angry Marines sent in on a domestic population. Why would you need to do that? What's the point of saying that other than intimidation? Just to back you up a little bit more, here you go. So there's a person called Barbara Walter. She's out of San Diego University. She has been saying that America is now in line for civil war. She started saying this around 2022 and 2023, about 2 years ago. Just to make it super scary, she runs the computer model that the CIA uses to predict when governments will fall into civil war. So they have CIA agents around the world. She's not an officer, but she's the person in the background. And she runs this model so that they can tell CIA agents, you're about to go in a country that's about to have a civil war, so they can have some idea of situational awareness. They've had this model out for a decade. It's 100% perfect at predicting future civil wars. It's been very effective at saving a lot of CIA agents' life. Great. Okay. I'm not a big fan of the CIA, but that's a good thing. Save these agents' lives. They're trying to do the right thing. I get it. She's now saying that feeding just metrics from America into the exact same computer model, it's saying America's ready to have a civil war. This
Oh,
thing's been
yeah.
100% accurate over the last decade.
I've been saying this for a year. Also, I said he gets elected into office, this country is going to go into a civil war. Anybody that knows Civil War history or even Revolutionary War history, which, early revolutionary movement almost became a civil war because there
Yep.
were a lot of loyalists in this country who, were called conservatives because they
Yep.
wanted to conserve the rule of the crown. And, that's a piece of history people don't realize. Conservatives, they would go to these town halls and churches and say, okay, if you want to conserve the crown, sit on the right. And if you want to fight for liberty, sit on the left. And that's how they became the right wing and the left wing, conservatives and liberals.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
Yes. And people will say, oh, but the Republicans are the ones that wanted to. No, you're confusing political party with ideals. The
Okay.
ideals haven't changed. The party switched, but the ideals have not changed.
Okay.
You can't say, oh, Republicans are the ones that, freed the enslaved people. No, the ideals that people should
Right.
not be the property of other people is what helped free. And, to be fair, the enslaved people freed themselves. That's a whole other conversation we don't have time for. But
thank you.
but the processes that led up to the Civil War, I already talked about the Revolutionary War and the list of grievances that they gave in the Declaration of Independence. The cultural war that was happening during the Civil War, we're seeing it here too. Inflation, high cost of inflation. At the time of the Civil War, there were a lot of labor laws that people were fighting, unions, right to form unions, fighting for fair working conditions, things like that. Those things were bubbling up. And then, of course, the enslaved people in the South and the issue of that on both the economy and the cultural issue with that. When you said, why do they have to send Marines in? Why do they have to send National Guard in? Because they are losing the culture war. They know they're losing the culture war. Any country that is losing the culture war is the one that has to rule with violence and military. The people are not happy with what's going on. That's why they have to send this out. Happy countries that are happy with their government, you don't have to do that. No one's having an issue with what's going on. But, he has the lowest approval rating of any other president other than himself. He's actually managed to tank his first lowest approval rating. And so that's why they're doing this. This is their last ditch effort, essentially, which we just funded through this Trump tax betrayal bill. This is his last ditch effort to force this country into these ideologies that they are spreading. And you're right, it's not him. He's a puppet. He's easily manipulated. That's why he was chosen. He's a cult of personality. That's why he was chosen. I do disagree with you a little bit. I think if Trump was not in office, I think if Trump was not in office, I do not think that JD Vance is able to carry that cult of personality that he has, because Trump is a narcissist. And in order for you to pass your cult of personality to somebody, you have to endorse them continuously. And he treats JD Vance like JD Vance is like a little gnat that's just flying around his head.
True.
Anytime JD Vance tries to make a comment of coming from this, what to me, it's, I don't know how you call a fat 70-something-year-old racist man strong is beyond me, because I'm pretty sure I could I could beat him up. But you have JD Vance, every time he tries to make a comment or say something that he thinks is so, it slaps so hard, it falls like a dead weight in water. He doesn't have that personality to deliver those punches. When you talked about Alex Padilla, who's my rep, actually, when you talked about him being thrown to the ground and handcuffed, JD Vance's response, calling him Jose Padilla, that fell
I didn't know that.
flat. Yes, he referred to him as Jose Padilla. It fell flat in the water. If Trump had done it, MAGA would have lost their minds. He doesn't have the same, so they know they have to move fast, because this old fart doesn't have a lot of time with us. He's dementia ridden. he's he's the face of their agenda. Unfortunately, the people behind him are very smart. Stephen Miller, Russell Vogt, they're all very smart. The Heritage Foundation has been working on this for a long time. Peter Thiel, um, uh, uh, I'm blanking on that. Yarvis, Curtis, is it Yarvin, Curtis Yarvin, who started with the whole fire all the federal workers, gut the economy, put all the money in the hands of the rich, make a tech oligarchy. This is the model that they're following. They've been doing this for decades. People don't they think that this is new. This is not a new movement. They just found
Yeah.
a face.
Yeah.
They found a face that will
Sure.
do it
Sure.
because he's weak
But
and he's stupid.
right. But by your own words, these are not new ideas. He didn't invent them. They've been around. The whole base likes this. One of the things that shocked me was when the Republican Party condemned January 6th, and then they walked back their condemnation. Trump was politically weak at that point, and they gave it to him. He wasn't in a position to push them, and they came back and go, no, we're just going to walk back, not condemning an insurrection. They did that. Additionally, the push to repeal abortion, Trump made that happen, but that was because the Republicans kept pushing for it. Finally, when I talked to a lot of experts, they would bring up Ron DeSantis was actually leading harder into the culture wars earlier on when he was popular than Trump, and was threatening Trump to take the leadership. So Vance, no. The other guy, Mike Pence, no. But a riled up group of people who've tasted power and were able to get riled up with raw meat of racism is still there. We've fed this wild tiger human meat. They're going to come hunting for humans again in the future, even if Trump's gone.
Yeah, I think that's why we're seeing so many sycophants right now in Congress, because they're hoping to be the one to carry the legacy.
Rubio.
Yes, Rubio. Oh, Rubio.
He's disgusting. Yeah.
Disgusting. And they're all vying, like these little parasites. Yep. They're vying for the opportunity for that presidential run. But again, because Trump is a true narcissist, he's not going to endorse anybody else but himself. He doesn't care about anybody else.
Sure.
And that could end up being the end of their own destruction. But as far as I'm concerned, and as far as California should be concerned, it doesn't matter. It doesn't, even if they don't get the presidential election, it's not like, oh, we should just stop trying to secede. No, we should secede from the union, because it was this easily taken over before. It's going to be this easily.
Thank you. There was some people who were telling me like, oh, well, what if Kamala got in? Wouldn't that make everything better? And I go, it changes nothing. And they're like in shock. And I go, you just said the country is so easy to rig an election. If it was Kamala was there and she's gone, and it's that easy to rig an election and get away with it, you think that's a stable country to be part of?
Absolutely not. There were people that were celebrating the Supreme Court ruling not allowing federal judges to make, nationwide injunctions. And people are like, oh, when we get back to power in 2026, I said, no, this is wrong. This is bad. We don't want that power either. I don't want any party to have that sort of unadulterated power. Do you understand? Just because you're Democratic or you're independent, that doesn't make you good. This is not good versus bad. Politicians can all be corrupt. Look at the value, the worth of people in Congress. Now, some of them arguably came in with that wealth from their previous, but a lot of them got wealthy in office. They're just as corrupt. Don't even get me started on Marjorie Taylor Greene. Insider trading queen of America. But these people are worth millions of dollars. They're benefiting from his tax cuts. And, quite frankly, like my rep here is Scott Peters. I am so upset at Scott Peters. I sent him an Instagram. I'm like, I'm done voting for you, dude. I've been voting for you for years. And you're done. I'm done. Whoever's running against you in the primaries, I don't care if it's Mickey Mouse. I'm voting for him because you are spineless. You are worth $60 million. You live in a mansion in La Jolla, and you do not represent your constituents in this district in San Diego. You continuously vote on the side of, this. Don't be mad at me. I'm not a yell and scream kind of guy. Won't hold real town halls, won't answer real questions in his video town halls, didn't stand behind Al Green for the impeachment. I know it was symbolic. I know it wouldn't gotten passed, but you left that man standing at the inauguration and you left him standing again. Just get behind him and say, yes, this man has committed acts of treason to the United States of America. He should be impeached. We all knew it wasn't going to pass, but symbolically, you needed to show the people that you were behind the people. You had what? How many tens of thousands? 60,000 San Diegans show up on June 17th to protest with signs saying we want him impeached, and you sat there and said, "Yeah, I'm going to vote no on it." What are you doing? These Democratic leaders have to understand that their actions are symbolic. I don't care if it wasn't going to happen. You need to listen to your constituents. We had anywhere from 5 to 8 million people show up and protest in one day. And all of these Democratic leaders that didn't stand on that said, yeah, no, we're not going to focus on it. Why not? This is what your constituents are screaming. And that's the biggest issue. Constituents are not being heard. Even in these ruby red states, these GOP leaders were being called. Please don't do this. Please don't take my Medicaid. Please don't take our SNAP benefits. Please don't, give more money to ICE. We don't stand behind building more concentration camps in this country. We don't want a militarized police state. Please don't do this. They voted yes on that bill anyway. Once the people their voices are no longer heard, literally one of the grievances in the Declaration of Independence, what power do the people have left other than to start a civil war or start a revolutionary war? Or in the case of California, coming from a position of strength, saying, yeah, you know what, this doesn't work for us. This is a big nah for us. We're out of here.
Yeah, and we have a legal means to get out. We'll get to that in a second. But how do you feel about that? So I see a lot of Republicans backing this.
And the Supreme Court will probably let them do it.
All right. Well, that seems unconstitutional and illegal.
Yeah. What Constitution? There is no Constitution. The Constitution now is just a recommendation.
Yeah.
It's no longer a law of the land. We just saw that with the Supreme Court.
Yeah. So we're talking about this, and here's the donor states and the red states, and we've had to support them, and these people don't like us. I mean, Trump treats us like garbage.
Yes.
And the thing that got me was when he said he's going to send the Marines in, when he said I'm sending the National Guard in against the will of the governor, I'm going to threaten the governor, I'm going to throw a senator to the ground, I'm going to deny emergency aid because I don't like you guys. There was no protest from the Republican Party. There was no group of 8 senators. There was no Fox News host who said, look, Mr. Trump, I back your agenda, but come on, you cannot treat fellow Americans this way. There was no group of Republican voters that said that. The Republicans across America were totally fine with all of this behavior and us being treated this way, and none of them said anything. And I get, people are afraid to challenge Trump, but what I saw was a lot of videos going, yeah, get him.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Not people going, I'm scared to say anything. I'll just be quiet while he does. No, it was like, yeah, get him. Yeah. So let me show you that. All right, now let me show you this. And I want to see if you can draw the connection.
Perfect. We need their support to let us leave. I actually love that.
Does that make sense? That I'm going to send combat trained troops on you. I'm going to threaten your governor. I'm going to order the National Guard against you. I'm not going to be there for emergency assistance. By the way, half of my party views you and me as not American.
Yeah.
By the way, that survey included some California Republicans who would have a little bit more of an easy time on this. If we pull those California Republicans out of the survey and we just look at Republicans across America, it's over half of the Republican Party outside of California views everyone here as not American. By the way, this came out last year before Trump said that he'd send troops and the National Guard and he wouldn't help us out with disaster assistance. And like I said, before we found out where there was no Republicans complaining about any of those events.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely. Absolutely. I'm so sorry. My boyfriend has a flat tire, so I need to take him to the car shop. So he was just,
Oh, okay.
he
We'll wrap it up. We'll wrap it up. Let me show you this one map and then we'll wrap it up. So this is landslide elections. So basically, in each county for the presidency, a Republican win by 20 percentage points over the Democrat. A Democrat will win by 20 percentage points over the Republican. Basically means if you're a Republican, don't go to one of those blue counties because you're going to get beat by 20 points. So it's not even going to matter.
yeah.
So from 1992, about a third of the country was blue and red landslide, but about a third of the country was gray, meaning it was open to anybody could win. By 2012, that was mostly wiped out. Most of the country is now hardcore red or hardcore blue. Let's take a look at the year 2020. Uh-oh, it's all hardcore red and blue, and all of the gray is now wiped out. If this pattern goes back to 1992 and continues up to 2020, it looks like America's polarized and has gotten there over decades, and that's not going to change in the next day or two or with an election.
No, I mean you would again, maybe the presidential election once people start burying their children, but certainly not the 2026 because again these gigantic cuts are not going to go through until after the midterms.
Yeah.
I think the presidential election is going to be something really worth watching, but that's if we can make it that far.
Yeah.
Because the whole purpose of fascism is to not get there. What fascist government allows a free and fair election? There isn't one. Now it is interesting to mention briefly. I know we do have to go because I got to get his car to the shop. But it is interesting with Elon Musk coming out saying that he's forming the American Party, and that that's a whole other episode. But I think that's going to throw some major kinks into what we're going to see with upcoming elections if he's able to pull this off. Because I think there are a lot of people that are frustrated with the weakness of the Democratic Party and are obviously very not in line with what's going on with now what I call the American Fascist Party. There is no Republican Party anymore. And so, maybe that'll be a middle ground. I don't know. I don't know if he's even going to pull it off. They're probably going to deport him before he gets a chance to do that. But I do want to remind you, I don't know if you saw this tweet from the Republican GOP representative in Wisconsin, Van Orton, where somebody posted, these cuts are going to cut, 17 million people are going to lose Medicaid. All these people are going to lose SNAP benefits. This is going to devastate our country. And he responded, yes, with an exclamation point, like, yes. And he did take that tweet down, but the internet is forever. And it's our job, while we are supporting the secession movement, in the meantime, we're in these in-between stages, it's our job to educate the public and remind them of these things. These people do not have their best interests in mind. But I'm all for Calexit because, again, regardless of who's in power, democracy is so fragile in this country. And California is not going to be able to withstand the quicksand of fascism any better than any other state if we allow this to continue further without saving ourselves.
That was perfect. We'll end it there. I'd love to have you back if you're willing.
Absolutely. This was a great conversation. I feel like I could talk to you for hours.
I'll have you back. But this was perfect because it was just, you're not me. I'm like, here's these facts. How do you view this? And you're like, yeah, an apple's red and an orange is orange and a banana's yellow.
Yes.
Duh. So it's great because I can keep doing this. They're like, yeah. But the third person goes, no, I see the orange is colored orange too.
Yes.
And that changes everything. They go, oh my God. So thank you. Yes. I'll have you back. I know you got to go. I hope you get that car fixed.
Thank you. Oh, and real quick, I want to tell you, I sent you I don't remember if it was an email or text, but when you sign up for your petition, it doesn't actually email you the petition. It says sign up so you can get the petition because you have to print it out and sign it and mail it in. But I haven't gotten the petition emailed to me, and neither has my boyfriend. So just wanted to give you an
I'll email it to you right now.
Okay. Awesome. if there's a link where people can print out the petition, that would be great, because I can share that with.
Yeah, I can do that too. We were
Yeah.
primarily having people go through, so they register, and then the machine automatically emails.
Yeah, I'm not getting the automatic
Yeah,
email.
I understand. It's not perfect. It generally works, but I'll make sure you get the petition
Okay, great.
today. Yeah,
Great.
and I'll get the link to you also today.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. You are amazing. Keep
You're
up the good
amazing.
work.
Okay. All right.
I
We'll talk
appreciate
soon.
the fight. Yes. Take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.